This is a photo of Robert Giblin and Precious Charbonneau. He posted it to Facebook with the caption, "Happiness is," just 17 hours before police were called to their apartment building. They looked like any other couple, content, close, and in love. According to his Facebook page, they got married on November 14th, 2015, so when this photo was taken, they had been husband and wife for just over a month. Robert was 43, and Precious was 33, and also 9 weeks pregnant. Robert joined the Canadian Armed Forces in 1997. He started in the Navy, then switched to the Air Force and became an intelligence operator. He deployed to Afghanistan twice in 2005 and 2007. He served for 18 years. His friends from the military said he seemed to handle tours well. Nobody noticed any problems. When they spoke to him after the wedding, he seemed ecstatic. In his own words, he was a 43-year-old man who finally found love. On Sunday, December 20th, 2015, emergency crews were called to an apartment at 111 Raglan Avenue in Toronto around 6 p.m. Responders found Giblin and Charbonneau dead outside the apartment building. Residents said the pair had fallen from a balcony on the 21st floor. A man on the second floor was out on his balcony having a cigarette when Precious fell past him. He thought someone had thrown a garbage bag out of a window. Then he looked down. He called 911 immediately. While he was still on the phone with authorities, a second body hit the ground. The next day, the police confirmed that Giblin had stabbed Charbonneau multiple times before the fall. They couldn't say for certain whether she was thrown or whether she jumped. Giblin had not been stabbed. Police determined he was responsible for her death and were not looking for any other suspects. A neighbor who lived across the hall said he thought they were a nice couple. They kept to themselves and sometimes shared a few jokes in passing. But building management had a different story. According to one resident, staff told him Giblin was downstairs every day complaining and yelling about something to do with the building, and that something was wrong with him mentally. Giblin's military friends couldn't make sense of it. One man who had known him for nearly 20 years said it didn't add up. He'd never seen Giblin so happy as he was with Precious. The Facebook post was so affectionate and so constant that his friends almost wanted to tease him about it. The two of them were getting ready for Christmas and a baby, and then this. His friends insisted he didn't have PTSD. They said they would have noticed, but 3 days after the deaths, an obituary appeared in the sub-story star placed by his family. It said Robert had suffered from PTSD, and he had sought treatment. He had worked on putting his life back together, and when he was well, he was overjoyed to have met and married Precious. The obituary also described him as, quote, Uncle Bob, a playmate to his nieces and nephews and a role model. But there is one more horrifying detail about this case. 3 days after Robert and Precious's deaths, someone found a fetus outside the same apartment building near a dumpster. Police initially said it wasn't connected to Charbonneau. DNA testing later confirmed that it was. Robert's Facebook page was full of photos like this one, photos showing that he loved his wife. No one could have imagined that just hours after this photo was posted, that Precious would meet a truly horrifying and gruesome end at the hands of this very same man. This photograph was taken on October 22, 2003, off the coast of Queensland, Australia. A diver named Gary Stempler was taking pictures of his wife underwater when he snapped this shot. He didn't realize until weeks later, when the photos were developed, what he had just captured in the background. The photos showed Tina Watson laying face up on the ocean floor, with her arms stretched upward. She was 26 years old and on her honeymoon, having gotten married 11 days earlier. She was in Australia with her husband, David Gabriel Watson. She met David while they were students at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. They began dating in January 2001. David was an enthusiastic scuba diver. By the time of their wedding, he had completed 55 dives, while Tina had only completed 5. She earned her diving certificate just before the wedding on October 11, 2003. She had a heart condition, but on her dive application, she stated that she had never had heart problems or surgery. The couple planned a scuba trip to the Great Barrier Reef for their honeymoon. They flew to Sydney for a week before heading to Townsville. On the night of October 21st, they boarded a dive boat called the Spoil Sport. They chose to dive the wreck of the SS Yongala, a passenger ship that sank in 1911. It's a popular dive site, but a difficult one. Tina had taken part in 11 dives total, but none were in open water. This particular dive was labelled a red dive due to strong underwater currents. Red dives are normally recommended for advanced divers only. The dive company offered an orientation and guided dive with a dive master. The couple refused. At around 10:30 a.m. on October 22nd, Tina lost consciousness and sank to the bottom. 30 meters below the surface within 2 minutes of beginning the dive. What happened next depends on who you believe. David claimed the currents were stronger than they expected. He said Tina signaled that she wanted to return to the dive rope. He noted a look of worry on her face. Then, he said, she accidentally knocked his mask and air regulator loose. When he recovered his sight, Tina was sinking too quickly for him to retrieve her. He said an ear problem prevented him from diving deeper to help. He also stated that there was nothing in his training as a rescue diver about how to get someone in trouble to the surface. Other divers nearby at the time told a different story. Stanley Stutz saw Gabe engage in an underwater bear hug with his flailing wife, after which he headed for the surface while Tina fell to the ocean floor. David climbed aboard the Spoil Sport and alerted dive instructor Wade Singleton, who brought Tina to the surface after 10 minutes underwater. She was taken aboard an adjacent dive boat, where a doctor tried to resuscitate her for 40 minutes. She could not be revived. When Tina was brought to the surface, her regulator was still in her mouth and her tank still had air. Tests indicated no fault with her equipment. Over time, David gave police 16 different versions of what happened to Tina. None of those versions matched what eyewitnesses had seen. Prosecutors allege that David had a financial motive. They said he hoped to collect $210,000 in insurance benefits, but his attorneys called this motive ludicrous and pointed out that the beneficiary of Tina's life insurance policy was her father, not her husband. In June 2009, David traveled voluntarily from the United States to Australia to face trial. He pleaded not guilty to murder and guilty to manslaughter, which he was convicted of. He was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. The prosecutors described him as an experienced diver trained in rescuing panicked divers who had allowed his wife to sink to the ocean floor without making any serious attempt to retrieve her. His attorney saw it differently, saying that he basically pled guilty to being a bad dive buddy and that he accepted responsibility for his limited role and not being able to save Tina as she drowned. After serving his sentence in Australia, David was deported to Alabama, where authorities charged him with murder. But on February 23, 2012, the judge dismissed the case due to lack of evidence. A key diving expert in the original investigation, Colin McKenzie, had maintained that a diver with David's training should have been able to bring Tina up, but he later retracted much of his testimony after being provided with the couple's diver logs, certificates, and medical histories to which he had not previously had access. Mackenzie said David should not have been allowed in the water at all, and never as a dive buddy for his wife, who had no open water scuba experience. A leading expert in dive medicine, Professor Michael Bennett, stated that Tina was unfit to dive without clearance from a cardiologist due to her heart condition. David had received his rescue certification, normally a 4-day course, after completing a 2-day course in an Alabama quarry. After having his name cleared in the US hearing, David remarried and removed himself from the public eye. Tina's father said he would keep working toward the truth as long as he was breathing. And now we come back to this photograph, a tourist snapshot that accidentally captured a woman's body on the ocean floor. In the lower right-hand corner, Tina Watson lies 25 meters down. Her husband was somewhere above her, swimming toward the surface. Whether he was going to help or was leaving her to die, nobody knows for certain, and the courts weren't able to prove it either way. This is a still from an episode of Hill Street Blues called Requiem for a Hairbag. It aired on November 18, 1982. In the episode, Dominic Dunn played a teenage mother who was a victim of parental abuse and chose to give her baby up for adoption, out of fear of repeating the cycle of abuse she endured with her own mother. If you look at her face, you'll see some bruises, due to an altercation with her abusive partner John Sweeney that occurred just before the episode was filmed. Her bruises on screen were real. Since she was playing an abused teen in the episode, she wore no makeup. The episode was dedicated to her memory, because by the time it aired, Dominique Dunn was dead. Dominique met John Thomas Sweeney, a sous chef at the restaurant Marmaison, at a party in 1981. After a few weeks of dating, they moved into a one-bedroom house together on Rangley Avenue in West Hollywood. Due to Sweeney's jealousy and possessiveness, the relationship quickly deteriorated. The couple frequently fought and Sweeney began to physically abuse Dunn. According to one account, during an argument on August 27, 1982, he yanked handfuls of her hair out by the roots. Frightened, Dunn fled to her mother's house, where Sweeney showed up and began to bang on the door and windows, demanding to be let in. A few days later, Dunn returned to the home she shared with Sweeney, and the two resumed their relationship. Then came September 26, 1982. During another argument at their home, Sweeney grabbed Dunn by the throat, threw her on the floor, and began to strangle her. A friend who was staying with the couple at the time heard loud gagging sounds and ran into the room. Dunn told the friend that Sweeney had tried to kill her, but Sweeney denied the claim and asked Dunn to come back to bed. She pretended she was going to comply, but snuck out the bathroom window. When Sweeney heard Dunn start her car, he ran out and jumped on the hood. Dunn stopped the car long enough for Sweeney to jump off, then she drove away. The attack happened the day before she filmed the Hill Street Blues episode, so these bruises are from Sweeney strangling her the night before. For the next few days, she stayed with her mother and at the homes of friends. She later called Sweeney and ended the relationship. After he moved out, Dunn had the locks changed and moved back into their Rangley Avenue home. On October 30th, 1982, a few weeks after they broke up, Dunn was at home rehearsing for the miniseries V with actor David Packer. While she was speaking to a female friend on the phone, Sweeney had the operator break into the conversation. 10 minutes later, Sweeney showed up at Dunn's home. After speaking to him through the locked door, Dunn agreed to speak to him on the porch, while Packer remained inside. Outside, the two began to argue. Later, Packer said he heard smacking sounds, 2 screams, and a thud. Packer left the home through the back entrance, approached the driveway, and saw Sweeney in some nearby bushes, kneeling over Dunn. When police arrived, Sweeney met them in the driveway with his hands in the air. He told them he killed her. He said he didn't think he choked her that hard, but he just kept on choking her. He said he lost his temper and blew it again. She was transported to the hospital, where she was placed on life support. She never regained consciousness. On November 4th, her parents consented to remove her from life support. She was 22 years old, 19 days shy of her 23rd birthday. Sweeney was charged with first-degree murder, to which he pleaded not guilty. During the trial, the prosecution called one of Sweeney's ex-girlfriends, Lillian Pierce. She stated that she and Sweeney had dated on and off from 1977 to 1980. Pierce claimed that during that relationship, Sweeney had assaulted her on 10 separate occasions, and as a result, she was hospitalized twice. During one of the assaults, Pierce sustained a perforated eardrum and a collapsed lung. She later sustained a broken nose. At the request of Sweeney's attorney, Pierce did not testify in the jury's presence. The attorney requested that the judge rule her testimony inadmissible because it was prejudicial. The judge granted the request, and the jury learned about Pierce's testimony only after the trial. The judge also refused to allow testimony from Dunn's mother, as well as Dunn's friends, citing their statements about Sweeney's abusive nature as hearsay. On September 21st, 1983, after 8 days of deliberation, the jury acquitted John Sweeney of second-degree murder, but found him guilty of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. Dunn's family was outraged by the verdict, calling it an injustice. On November 7th, Sweeney was sentenced to 6 years in prison for manslaughter, with an additional 6 months for the assault charge. He served 2.5 years before being released on parole. Jurors from the trial stated that had they heard Lillian Pierce's testimony, they would have convicted Sweeney of murder. One former juror said her testimony would have made all the difference in the world. After his release, Sweeney was hired as a head chef at an upscale restaurant in Santa Monica. When Dominique's brother Griffin and mother Ellen discovered where Sweeney was working, they stood outside the restaurant and handed flyers to patrons. The flyers read, "The hands that will prepare your meal tonight also murdered Dominique Dunn." Sweeney was fired almost immediately. In an effort to avoid further altercations, he changed his name. But no one will ever forget that he was the one who caused the bruises that Dominique Dunn had on her face during her last ever screen appearance, and that he would ultimately murder her not long before it aired. This picture is from a video recorded by Kenesha Antoine that shows her boyfriend Steven Weber. He's underwater and holding a piece of notebook paper in a plastic bag against a window. The note reads, "I can't hold my breath long enough to tell you everything I love about you, but everything I love about you, I love more every day." On the other side it says, "Will you please be my wife? Marry me." Steven Weber was a DJ from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He met Kenesha, a lawyer, through a mutual friend in 2017. They fell in love almost immediately. His best friend of 23 years said that Steven told him, quote, "I'm going to marry this one. I'm going to ask her to marry me." The two would go on a trip that they'd been planning for almost a year to Africa. For Kenesha's 40th birthday, they wanted to do something really special. They booked a stay at a place called the Manta Resort on Pemba Island off the coast of Tanzania. The resort has an underwater room. It's a 3-story floating structure anchored about 820 feet from shore. The top floor has a sound deck. The middle level, at sea level, has a lounge and bathroom. Below that, submerged about 13 feet underwater, is the bedroom. The cabin is anchored in water about 32 foot deep. One night costs around $1,700. The couple booked 4 nights. Kenesha posted videos on Facebook showing the couple laughing while exploring their accommodations. In the videos, it's clear how in love the two are. On the third day of their stay, September 19, 2019, Stephen plunged into the water. Kenesha assumed he was doing something in the upstairs cabin. To her surprise, Stephen swam down and appeared on the other side of the bedroom window. She took out her phone and started recording. Stephen was wearing a snorkeling mask and swim fins. He pressed his handwritten notes, sealed in a plastic bag, against the glass. In the video, Kenesha can be heard excitedly giggling as she reads what he'd written. Then he flipped the notes over and produced a ring. Then he swam up, out of view. Kenesha ran up to the top of the cabin to meet him and embrace him. Unfortunately, he never came back up to the surface. Kenesha tried to seek help, but she couldn't reach the resort personnel by phone or radio. Eventually, she flagged down a passing boater. The boater found Stephen and tried unsuccessfully to revive him. They attempted CPR. At one point, he had a light pulse, but they were unable to bring him back. The man to resort confirmed that Stephen had tragically drowned while freediving alone outside the underwater room. The resort's CEO, Matthew Souse, said they responded to a problem in the water, but absolutely nothing could be done when staff arrived. Stephen's sister, Mandy, said he had been snorkeling multiple times during the trip. He was a strong swimmer. She says, "This is all we keep talking about. Something else happened besides him running out of breath." The family didn't know if he was injured on the way up, if he hit his head on something, or if he had a heart attack. Tanzanian authorities conducted an autopsy, but didn't provide a cause of death. The video Kenesha filmed that day is the last footage of Stephen Webber alive. She posted it on Facebook along with a tribute to him. She wrote that Stephen never got to hear her answer, which would have been 1,000,000 times yes. She said, "We never got to embrace and celebrate the beginning of the rest of our lives together, as the best day of our lives turned into the worst in the cruelest twist of fate imaginable." Kenesha described Stephen as kind, compassionate, somebody who regularly made her cry with laughter, and who showered her with love like none she'd ever experienced. Stephen's best friend Jared Monson said he broke down a few times at work after learning of Stephen's death. His sister released a statement saying, "Stephen has had a very interesting life and a lot of ups and downs, but he always and will always hold such a special place in the hearts of so many people. Stephen has been at the lowest points of his life, a low point that anyone could ever experience, and never at one point did he expect anyone to feel sorry for him or to pity him. And these past few years of his life have been the happiest, and even on his darkest day, he had a smile on his face." Stephen didn't have insurance, and his family set up a GoFundMe to cover the costs of bringing his body home. In one of her Facebook posts, Kenesha wrote, "I will find you and marry you in the next lifetime, and the next, and the next, and the next. I love you so much, and I always will." She also wrote, "Wherever in the universe Stephen's spirit now resides, he's probably entertaining someone with a story about how he royally screwed up that proposal and died while being extra." The last line says about who Stephen Webber was. Even in her grief, Kenesha knew exactly what he would have said about the whole thing. She knew the joke would have been made at his own expense. And now we go back to this photograph, Stephen underwater, holding a note against a window, asking the woman he loves with all his heart to marry him. She said yes, but he sadly never got to hear it. This is a photo of Kenneth County. As you can see, he's sitting in a wheelchair inside a Walmart in Epping, New Hampshire. Inside of his shopping basket are two 5-gallon yellow diesel containers, and he also has gashes covering his face and hands. The photo was taken on March 17, 2006. 4 days later, Kenneth would be dead, and his body would be burned with the same diesel containers shown in this image. Kenneth County was born in July 1981 in Malden, Massachusetts. He was described by his mother as a trusting and loving man with mental deficiencies. He had been diagnosed with autism as a child. Though kind-hearted and well-liked, Kenneth was also deeply lonely. One sleepless night in early 2006, Kenneth saw an ad for a phone dating hotline. He called, and Sheila Labar answered. Sheila lived in Epping on a 115-acre horse farm. She regularly enticed younger men to her farm, where she would torture and control them. She was notorious for targeting young men with mental deficiencies. Easily manipulated men who would bow down to her overbearing personality were her cup of tea. Kenneth and Sheila's first date was on Valentine's Day 2006. Just days later, he moved to Epping to live with her and work on the farm. A month later, Kenneth's mother, Caroline Lodge, contacted the Epping Police Department. No one had heard from her son in over a month. Lodge informed Epping Police that her son was learning disabled. She pleaded with officers to remove him from the farm. Police did conduct a welfare check. When officers visited the farm, Sheila denied knowing Kenneth, then suddenly changed her story and brought him to the door. He looked pale and weak, but insisted he was staying there by choice. Sheila LaBarre glared at him, then ordered the police off her property. Then came March 17th, the day this was taken. Police were called to the local Walmart. They had a suspicious person being disruptive in the store, a woman the Walmart had been having issues with for some time. They arrived and found Kenneth County inside, but he did not look the same as he did during the welfare check back in February. He was slumped in a wheelchair with his face bruised, hands swollen, and he was too weak to stand. His skin also looked ashen and very greyish. Before the officers could get to question out, Sheila appeared and loomed behind him. She told them that he was fine, and that his wounds were just the result of a car accident. One of the officers tried to ask Kenneth if he was okay. Sheila turned around and told him, "Don't fucking answer that question." She added, "You don't have to answer any fucking question they ask you." He said his injuries were from a car accident and that he was okay. There were reports from people at Walmart saying he needed an ambulance, but Kenneth was an adult. The police felt they couldn't intervene. LaBarre was eventually kicked out of the store. His mother was contacted by the police afterwards, and they told her what happened. She said, "I was beside myself, and you let her take him. You just let her take him. She's going to kill him." Within a matter of days, Kenneth County was dead. At around 1 a.m. on March 24, 2006, Sheila made a disturbing phone call to the authorities. She played audio of County confessing to be a paedophile. It was a coerced confession made under torture. Police rushed to the farm. They noticed a burn pile containing what looked like a large fleshy human bone fragments, and a pair of sneakers. When police asked for the sneakers, she refused. A search warrant was issued, and authorities arrested LaBarre on April 2, 2006, after she attempted to flee. She had changed her appearance, cutting her hair and dyeing it red, and had $80,000 in cash and cashier's checks on her when arrested. LaBarre admitted to stabbing County to death before burning his body, but there was another victim. Michael DeLodge was LaBarre's boyfriend who had lived with her at the farm. He was last seen alive in 2005. A bone, a spent shell casing, and his birth certificate were found in the septic tank of the farm in 2008. At her trial, LaBarre claimed she was an angel sent by God to punish paedophiles. She accused 2 men she killed of being paedophiles. There seemed to be no basis whatsoever in reality to any suggestions that her victims were paedophiles or child abusers. LaBarre pleaded not guilty on grounds of insanity. Psychiatrists testified that she was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and delusional disorder. Her plea was rejected by the jury. In June 2008, Sheila LaBarre was convicted of murdering Kenneth and Michael. The jury believed she was sane when she committed the crimes. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During a 3-week search of her farm, police discovered 3 human toes, which forensic analysis determined did not belong to either Kenneth County or Michael DeLodge. They had never been identified. In June 2010, a judge threw out a lawsuit brought by Kenneth's family against the 2 Epping officers who saw County at Walmart and didn't take action. Kenneth's mother wrote an obituary for him. She described him as a kind, caring, gentle young man who could not socially defend himself. She wrote that Sheila took advantage of him. She called Sheila a master of evil, who deliberately tortured her son and stripped him of all his dignity and self-worth. And that's the end of the video, folks. If you found this video interesting, be sure to like, leave a comment, subscribe if you're new, and consider supporting me on Patreon. All patrons get early ad-free access to videos, and higher tiers get their names on the board and a shout-out. I'd like to thank all of my patrons for their support, especially those whose names you're seeing on screen now, particularly Sonny Hauser, Charlie Boyle, Bailey Cosmic Black Metal 96, Mimi, Pizza Guy 111, Lagged Into Sunlight, KJ Musical, Losanna, Xander Stewart, Brandon Field, Anthony B. Fernandez, John Blood Smells Like Duty, Helen Korn, Kyle, BAN, Brendan O'Connell, Adam Clayton, Count Nagula, Danny Jade, Paul Mendoza, Squishy, Alex Christmas, Bella Schwartz, Belle Siegel, Stimulate, Inquisitor Zarius, and Dick the Cock Johnson and the Woodmaster at WrestleMania X69 or Maybe Not Dude. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.